You ready?
All
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Mr. Mainville, GRB Fulton High School. Thank you for joining me here today. I have Mr. Brown helping me out. We are at social distance, about 5-6 feet away from each other, both wearing respirators, gloves, the spiel. So we're trying to practice safe distancing. A little bit about today's dissection. Uh, we get these beavers through local trappers. The area is loaded with them, and so when people trap them, usually they just take off the pelt, and often in the gut pile it goes. What we do, what Mr. Brown and I do, is we get in between that. We get them to do a nice dissection for you. The animal is going to go to waste anyway. These weren't hunted for the purpose of this dissection today. We're just harvesting them so that we can get one more use out of it. Now, this is a high school dissection. This is a college level dissection. And of course, it's not anything lower. But what we're going to focus on are the body systems that we have been covering thus far. So circulatory system, respiratory system, digestive system. And then this week we went through the nervous system, endocrine, and then it's hard to do anything with the immune system with these guys, but we will especially look at the nervous system at the end. What you're about to see might be a little gruesome to start with. It's going to be missing its skin because it was skinned. But it's also, you'll get used to it, I think, after a bit. So one last thing about this guy, and it is a male. One last thing is that when you do take anatomy courses, they often ask you to give whatever you're taking and dissecting a name. And that's not to be cute, that's to give it respect. And things, when they have a name, we show them a little more respect, and that's what we're going to try and do. So I have chosen the name Woody. We're going to call him Woody today. So let's get Woody out. And okay, let's get a look and get a sense of what we're looking at. To start with, on the exterior, they have a lot of glandular, you can get a little closer, a lot of glandular tissue underneath. When we did the endocrine system, we talked about a lot of different types of glands. Well, underneath their neck, I don't know exactly what type of gland is because I'm not a beaverologist, but this is glandular tissue. I know that because of the way that it's shaped. It's very bubbly. I wish this is an experience I really want the students always to be a part of, to be able to feel this tissue. It's almost like a jello feel to it. I don't mean to be too descriptive or gross about it, but there it is. Moving up to the mouth, he's had a bad day with his dentistry, but beavers have to chew. If they don't chew, their teeth just continue to grow. And so the way that they fit together is the top tooth, you can see, wears down, and the top tooth wears down from the bottom tooth chiseling into it all the time when it bites. There are cases in zoos where beavers didn't have enough to chew, and these teeth just kept growing, and they will grow crooked. Some have been found with the teeth growing through the roof of the mouth, so they will continue to grow until the beaver dies. Okay, so let's start with some of the muscles on the exterior. This right here, this large packety muscle right there, it's called your masseter. This muscle is what you do your chewing with, and if you clench your teeth down, you can feel your masseter on the side of your mouth. That's the same thing with these guys. Now, of course, they have a much bigger one because that has to be so strong to chew through all the stuff that the wood that they chew through. What I'm going to do is I'm going to peel away, I'm going to cut away some of this glandular tissue so we can see some of the muscles underneath. I'm really good at Thanksgiving. My mom's watching, she'll attest to that. Okay, so this is that glandular tissue in its entirety. It's very flexible, very soft. I don't think this is the thyroid. That would be an enormous thyroid if it were, but it feels just, I don't know. Again, I need a student here to feel this for me. I'm going to put it in my bucket. Another use we're going to get out of this is I have space out back where I put out the remains, and we get live coyotes, fox. I've had a bald eagle sniff it and check it out, but never take anything. Of course, the vultures will come. All right, so moving up, we have the larynx is right underneath this set of muscles right here. Your larynx is your voice box. This muscle right here that I'm holding, there's a pair of them. This is my favorite muscle to name inside the entire body. It's called the sternocleidomastoid. The reason it's getting given that name because it inserts in 3 different places. Well, or originates in the sternum. So the sternum, it also goes up to the clavicle, and then it makes it all the way up to your jaw, and this little spot on your jaw called the mastoid process. So that's how it got its name, sternocleidoid mastoid. It's the Hulk muscle. When you see Hulk smash and he's like, and the sides of his neck start to get really cordy, that's where that muscle is. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start taking away some of this tissue so we can expose the larynx underneath the muscle. If you want to know, yes, this is my paring knife from the kitchen. Don't tell my wife. And while we're doing this, something you can do at home is I want you to grab your throat, not too hard. We don't want to make things weird. But you can feel up and down on your throat the cartilaginous rings that make up your trachea. And it goes from your larynx, your voice box, down to your trachea. And this is well, there's the larynx right here. And then it goes down into the trachea. And you can see right there. Yep, come back a little bit for the focus. Focuses oddly. This has to stay open. Your windpipe has to stay open so that you can breathe. Behind this is the esophagus. I'll get to that in a minute. Your esophagus can close because if you're not swallowing, then you don't need to have your esophagus open. But if you're breathing, which is hopefully every moment in between, just let me roll my sleeve up without being gross. This has to stay open. So the cartilaginous rings, they keep the whole thing open. So I'll take apart a little more of this. I'll try and get as far behind it as I can so I don't damage the esophagus. Clean away some of that muscle. How you doing, Mr. Brown?
Good.
And having this outside, man, this doesn't even smell. There's no odor to this. Why I'm also wearing a mask. But usually there's some odor. Nothing. All right, there's a lot going on in this shot. So let's clear some of this away. What you're seeing right here are some nerves that are running down. We call them cranial nerves. Your nerves that run down to the heart and the lungs, they don't have to go through your spinal cord. They run outside of the brain all the way down. So this is one of the cranial nerves, and it passes right behind the trachea and larynx. Now this muscular thing that I'm poking with my finger, that is the esophagus. They travel together. Trachea sits on the front, esophagus sits on the back. And in a moment, we're going to take this whole thing out. But it's important to see how closely they are, and they're the same inside our body. I was just telling Mr. Brown that when I first started doing this about 10 years ago, I had never, ever taken apart a beaver, yet I dove right in because if you're talking about mammals, all mammals are generally the same with a few exceptions here and there. So I had a lot of confidence about where everything was going to be. For instance, that the esophagus is always going to be found right behind the trachea on all mammals. So I'm going to start removing that from the head up here. Okay. And now, as I speak right now, the reason you can hear my voice is that inside my larynx, almost like a musical instrument, there's 2 fibrous muscles that go back and forth. And so they regulate, almost like a whistle, as air passes through. So if you look inside the larynx, that is what I just described. Those are the little flaps that as the beaver gets ready to make its calls, these little flaps will either pull together tight or open up for more air to flow through. But this is essentially its little voice box of how it would regulate its voice. Fascinating. Right above that, I tried to tack it as much as I could. I need that. You can see that there is this little flap right there. That is called your epiglottis. And your epiglottis will close up when you swallow, and it'll cover up, and it fits nicely over the trachea, right? Covers it up, and then your food passes by, and then it flips right back up. You can even, if I let it go, it flips right back up. The muscle that was above it was what caused it to go down so that you don't choke. Everybody can see that okay at home. Let me do a couple more flips. This is my first time doing a live YouTube beaver dissection, so please be patient with me. Anything interesting in the comment section, Mr. Brown?
Oh, we got Donna Parkhurst. We have someone that thought this was going to be a discussion.
Discussion spelled wrong? Yes. So here we go. Ready? This is going to be a fun part. You can already see a lot of the blood leaking out. I am going to go down the sternum, and I'm going to peel away the pectoral muscles. If you're into working out, if you're into the body, if you're into exercise, you have to know that muscles only contract. And so when we do a push-up, and when this little beaver does his little push-ups, to get that push-up to work, the chest muscle starts at the sternum, and it stretches across our chest, and then it inserts way over on our humerus. Same with this guy. And so when this muscle contracts, it causes the arm to move forward. So when this pectoralis muscle contracts, if it were to pull tight, the arm would go forward. And that's where bench presses and push-ups, that's what causes us to have larger chests. And if you've done a lot of push-ups or you've done a lot of bench pressing, you know, oh my God, the corners of my chest feel horrible. That's because it's this muscle that you've been working out. It's been being pulling that arm. Even if I pull on the pectoral, you can see that it pulls that arm in. Okay, so I'm going to go right down the sternum. I'm going to fillet back the chest muscle. And what we'll be able to see are the ribs and the chest cavity. Something interesting about your chest cavity is that, and I think you're going to find throughout this dissection, is that we are very well organized inside. It's not just a bunch of lumped organs and bloody and messy. I think you're going to find the only reason there's blood here is because I opened up an artery. But you're going to find that this is a highly organized, very clean on the inside. So your lungs have to stay pressurized. You've probably heard of a collapsed lung, or I guess that's as far as I can go with that. You've heard of people having a hard time breathing because their lung has been punctured. Well, you can see that these are the ribs. Come a little closer on that side. These are the ribs. Here's the muscles in between. So when they breathe, they pull the ribs closer. So let's think about a breath. Your diaphragm, when you breathe in, there's a diaphragm that runs right here. It's a muscular sheet. And when it contracts, it opens up the chest cavity. And then when you exhale, it relaxes, and then the cavity goes. It has to be airtight. So you have these lungs that sit in. You have these lungs that sit inside of the cavity, and the cavity has to be completely airtight. This is airtight, obviously, to the outside world, but it's airtight to the rest of the body. And you'll see what I mean as we keep peeling away some of this muscle. I'm going to have to turn just a little bit. Left a lot of my good tools at school. Some really nice razor knives that cut right through this. If you know someone who's had open heart surgery, this is, first of all, this isn't the way they would go about it. But to get to the heart, they have to crack the sternum, and the sternum is located right under here. If you have any comments, or if there's something you'd like to know about as we're going through this, please leave them in the comment section. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. This is brought to you by Squarespace. just about good. Cutting through all the nerves. There's the brachial nerve. All right, so here's, you may have broken your collarbone before. This is the collarbone right here. It has two collarbones, and your collarbones can come right over the top. The collarbones are connected to the sternum, and right below this little piece of muscle that's left is the sternum. It's a flat bone, and then the sternum connects to all the ribs as they go down. I'm going to break the sternum and clavicle joint so I can just get to the thoracic cavity. Thoracic cavity is where your lungs are. Now I've already, I can feel that I broke the seal a little bit, and because of the limitations of the camera, I can't show you, but if I put my finger down here, it stops. There's another membrane right here that prevents any more air. I mean, like I told you before, this has to stay nice and sealed. This is preventing any more outside air from coming in. So I'm going to have to get inside that membrane. And let's think about it. What am I going to see? If I open this up, every diagram you've seen since you were a little kid, you know that it starts with the heart and the lungs sit behind. So I should be able to see a heart, and then the lungs should be farther in the back. The sternum has a piece of connective tissue that connects to the heart and keeps it there. Think about running around and jumping around. You don't want your heart sloshing around inside your thoracic cavity. So it's all connected inside so it doesn't move too much. But then your heart even has this little bit of connective tissue that goes around it, and it's called the pericardium. Thank you. The pericardium is filled with a little bit of fluid, and it keeps the heart from rubbing up against something else. Think about your heartbeats every day, right? So let's do some math. I've got a resting heart rate of about 60. So 60 beats per minute. So there's 60 minutes in an hour, and there's 24 hours in a day, and there's 30-ish days in a month. This thing is always moving. And so take your hands and rub them together for a few minutes, and you can feel the heat that builds up. Same thing's going on with your heart. If your heart's always pumping on the inside of your body, it will be rubbing up against the inside of the tissues. It would be becoming abraded. So therefore, it sits inside this little membrane called the pericardium. And the pericardium has a little bit of fluid that lubricates it and prevents it from becoming irritated. If you know someone who's had pericarditis, that's a viral infection of that, and it can be treated, but that's where the name pericarditis comes from. All right. This is why I went out to the garage. Got to get the big boys. Now, this is what they would do if you had to have open heart surgery. You have to cut right down. I don't want to go too far because we'll be able to see the diaphragm if I'm not getting too crazy. All right, so I have the sternum in my hand. No, right here. You can see this connective tissue is connecting out to the heart. I'll get the heart exposed in a second, but I just want to make sure you see that the sternum actually has some pieces that are holding and anchoring other things inside the cavity. All right, so I start taking away the remainder of the sternum as best as I can. God, I'm getting old. All right. Make sure I got the diaphragm still there. I'm going to cut down the ribs. Let that blood leak out. Again, it should be pretty clean, except for me cutting up the arteries that I've been hitting. Your body, it doesn't just bleed on the inside. All the blood should stay inside the blood vessels. All right. So now that I've got the chest cavity open, this is the heart, and these are the two lungs that sit behind the heart. This right here, this massive piece of tissue at the bottom, this is the diaphragm. This is the muscle that contracts in and out for our breathing. Even at the diaphragm, you have more connective tissue coming up and covering up the heart. All right, so what I'm attempting to do right now, I want to take out the cardiovascular system all in one shot. I want to get the heart out. I want to get the lungs out. I want to be able to get the trachea out so that we can do a demonstration with the lungs. And this is where I start to ruin the integrity of the beaver, because let's think about this. I already said that this has to stay airtight, and I've ruined that. But when you swallow food, it has to pass down through this thoracic cavity and then into your abdomen. Your stomach's down here, the liver's right here, the stomach is right there. So there is a, let me find it. Get some of this connective tissue out of the way. There is a hole in your diaphragm where everything passes through, and it's right there. Can you get in there? Let me get that cloth. Yes, these are my dish rags. It's right there. You can see it. Pull that tissue out of the way. You see that? No, too much shine. You can expose it a little more. All right, we'll get it out in a minute. It's just getting a little too gooky. All right, so I have to get everybody out. I get in the back of the lungs. I start cutting away and work my way up to the neck. Oh, come on, buddy. Woody's not cooperating. Okay, almost there. All right. Yep. And a little more right there. Oh, this is going to be a good one. I can tell. Everybody off? Okay. I know it looks like a mess, but it's not. This is actually working out pretty good. Okay. And now I'm going to cut the esophagus. I have the esophagus right in my finger right now. That's the esophagus that would pass through the diaphragm right there. It's all welded together. All those cells made their decision a long time ago to be. And I cut that off. And now everything should just, with the exception of you, come out. All right. That's it. Let's see what we got. Get a little of this off. A little bit of cleaning to do. Be patient, please. Anybody in the comment section while I'm cleaning up?
Shout out to Miss Sard for not passing out yet. She's here viewing.
Sard, you're doing great. All right, so there's the heart. And like I said, it's inside a little sac. That's called the pericardium. And then behind it are the pair of lungs. The lungs are lobed. There's different pockets of lungs. I'm going to open up the pericardium so we can view the heart. All right. Here's the heart. You have the atriums. This is the right atrium. This is the right atrium. This is the left atrium. This is the right ventricle. This is the left ventricle. I think Mr. Brown's here. He can testify. Look how squishy the right side is, right?
It's quite squishy.
It's quite squishy. The left side, not as squishy, very muscular. The right side only pumps to the lungs. And so it only has a little bit of strength to pump the blood that comes from the right side of the body deoxygenated out to the lungs. When it makes a return trip through the left atrium, it comes into the left ventricle. This left ventricle has to pump to the entire body. Like, so I've split, like this is how the heart split. This little part that is on screen right, that is the right side of the heart. Everything over on my thumb side is the left side of the heart. That is this is responsible for pumping everything to, I mean, minus the lungs, everybody else gets their blood through that side. All right. So let's see what we can do about these lungs. He's been frozen and he's been thawed, so I can't speak to the integrity of the tissue, but this is always a very convincing demonstration. Give me 1 second to get my hose. So a little bit about this hose. This hose has two sides. It has a green tape side and has a not tape side. That is so that if I do multiple demonstrations, I can remember which side, the green side, goes in my mouth and which side doesn't. And sometimes you wonder about, like, well, that's a silly law, or why do we do it this way? Well, it's always because it had to happen that way. Something caused it to happen that way. There was an event. So yes, there was an event that caused me to realize I need to put tape on one side rather than the other. So pull this out. All right, I'm going to put this down the trachea, like so. I'm going to intubate him. All right, here I go. You got to feel that with your hand, buddy. Isn't that crazy?
That's awesome.
I know. And then when the air leaves, there it is. Yes, of course I'll do it again. All right, 1, 2, 3. There you have it. So I'm going to blow this up one more time. You've got to feel it with your hand when it's completely on, blowing on it. It feels, I don't know that there's even anything on earth that feels, well, first of all, feel that. So flimsy, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know how to describe this. Maybe you'll do it.
Wow. A piece of foam. Yeah.
I'm gonna pass out.
All right.
There she is. I'll let you sleep. All right. So the thing I want left to do is take a look at the heart. I'm gonna cut it off at the aorta. And I want to open up. See, normally, guys, in a normal bio year, we would spend a lot of time talking about the chambers of the heart. This is a not no food. Like, this is a, yeah. All right. And I just go through the heart. Cross section. Okay, so the heart sits in your body like this. And this is the right side and this is the left side. And if you open it up, you can see that the left side is very flimsy. There's not much to it. In fact, it's falling apart in my hand because of the freezing. but the left side it's like a piece of knotty muscle. And as I said before, this is because it pumps blood throughout the entire body. Can't do a good job showing you right now. I wish you were here to see it. The valves are pretty much gone. The hole for the aorta is still there. Follow that out. That's too bad. I have a better heart at school for demonstrations. This heart's on its way out, though. Okay. Gonna leave that over here. All right. Cardiovascular, lungs, heart. We still have the diaphragm, and right there is the esophagus, the top of the esophagus. And in fact, I don't know, that's pretty cool. I got lucky on that cut. You can see right at the top of the stomach, that little guy that's sticking out there. That is the pyloric valve that's going to let food into the stomach. Now, this whole thing, this whole body is encased in peritoneum. It's a connective tissue. It's on the inside of the body, and it's a connective tissue that holds it all together, keeps it from moving around. I'm going to make a nice cut. I'm going to try and I'm not going to be able to get it all, but I want to be able to get enough of the muscle away so that you can see what I mean by that membrane. Glad the weather held off. Right there. That's probably as good as I'm going to get. So as we start to pull this muscle away, you can see that there's this thin membrane below the muscle layer. We all have that. We're coelomates. We have a body cavity on the inside. So you have this membrane on the inside, then you have this muscularis muscle tissue that lays on the outside, and the skin would be here. This is just the last membrane before we get inside. Thinking about every anatomy diagram you've ever seen of a human body, they show the liver on top, stomach's here, there's a wad of intestine, and then there should be a large intestine that goes up and over, and then out to the rectum. Darn near killed him. So, see if I can get lucky. Oop, I already poked a hole. Get some of that more muscularis away. How you doing, Mr. Brown? Good. Good. All right, I'm not going to try. The smell is going to change.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Smells great.
It has that je ne sais quoi.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And talk about looking just like your diagrams. Liver, stomach. In here are all the small intestines. This is a part of the large intestine. This is an organ we don't have. I'll talk about that later. It's unique to herbivores. But let's think about what the liver does. The liver, first of all, it detoxifies our blood. It also makes bile. Bile is what's going to break down fat, help us emulsify fat for digestion. And that bile is stored in the gallbladder. And this little guy right here, that's the gallbladder. You got the liver, should be tucked underneath. Must have had liver surgery. Right underneath, that's the gallbladder. That has all the bile. And if we follow that down, the bile duct, it goes right into the intestines. Behind the liver should be the stomach. There it is. Behind the stomach should be the pancreas. And its pancreas is in a mess, but there it is. Oh, that's the intestine. This I think I have in my hand is the pancreas. Oh, no, right, sorry. Right there. And remember, I said glandular, right? We go all the way back to the front of the beaver, I said all this lumpy stuff, this bubbly stuff, it's glandular. Well, your pancreas is a gland, and it's bubbly, it's bumpy. It's the exact same type of tissue. Now, of course, it does something completely different. It's this, can you see it all right? I almost need a polarized lens on that. There's too much glare. That right there is the pancreas. It's very small. In your body, if you hold out two fingers, the length of your two fingers is your pancreas inside your body. All right, so let's start taking some of these pieces out so we can examine and see what Woody's been eating. Peel back from the diaphragm, get to the liver. Give the liver a place to go. All right, so from our esophagus, come on, bud. The fight's over, let go. There we go. All right, so this is the stomach. It's pouched. It's very muscular. This is the top pouch. This is the bottom pouch. And he's a herbivore, so whatever I find in here should be plant matter. And every time I cut it up, I'm never disappointed. It's just plant matter. It's just wood chips, bark. They don't actually eat the wood chips. They eat the bark, but we associate them with eating the wood chips because we see the wood down and we see the trees down and the chips everywhere. They're more bark eaters, and if I had students here, I'd ask them to smell it, because as gross as it sounds, it smells just like pine trees, and it smells like trees. And since we're social distancing and I'm going to leave my mask on, I'm not going to smell it myself. But that's what it smells like, a lot of tree-like matter. All right, so he's going to digest that. Now, plants can't, they're made of cellulose. Mammals don't have an enzyme to break down cellulose. So whatever enzymes he can use to get nutrients out of this, the cellulose is going to have to wait for later. All right, stomach's breaking down proteins, breaking down what it can, and then it makes its way to its intestines. Now, of all the parts of this, of all the parts that I take into consideration during this dissection, the part that happens next, to me, is possibly the most beautiful thing inside this animal, and it's also inside us. Once the food leaves the stomach and it enters the small intestines, it has to be broken down. That nutrient has to be absorbed by us. So as it passes through the intestines, think of the food passing through the intestines. It has to go somewhere. You have to extract the nutrients. So along the stretch of all of our intestines, there are little capillaries that all bleed off of the intestines, and they all go to the liver. Your liver has the first bite at the apple, so to speak. All of the nutrients that are first absorbed out of our intestines always go to the liver first to be detoxified, to be detected, to be checked out. But to get there, they have to start off in the capillaries, which go to little blood vessels called arterioles, and those continue to go and continue to branch and branch, almost like headwaters on a mountain going into secondary streams, third streams, until you got the Mississippi River heading right inside the liver. To get that, you have to, whatever. To get that, you have to have a blood network to do that. So let's find a good example. There we go. So if you look at the blood vessels on this intestine, get a little closer. Here you have the small intestine, and microscopically, there's all these little tiny capillaries that are coming off. Those capillaries feed into larger blood vessels, which are larger blood vessels, until they get to this larger blood vessels. Now it's merging with this blood vessel, and they all go back to what we call the hepatic portal vein. This ends up going back to the liver. HEPA, I think in biology or anatomy, HEPA is going to be your liver. But if I just fan this out, this is just a tiny piece of its overall intestines. And let me do it this way. How about this? Since we're not using this piece of, just to get a sense of it. There. It's almost like a flower. All of these blood vessels are branching back down into the liver. It's called the small intestine because it's low diameter. It's about the diameter of your pinky, maybe a little bigger. Food passes through very slowly through the intestines. It gets absorbed and then brought into the body. But it's small intestine because of diameter, not because of length. This is the longest organ of everything we've touched so far. So to prove that, let's start where the stomach was. Got to get back to there. And we'll find it. We're done with that part. So I can start breaking apart this. And Mr. Brown, will you feel right there? Feel that cord?
Yeah.
It's a connective cord that runs through the entire intestines and holds it all in place, gives the tissue something to anchor to. I'm going to pull that out. I'm just going to keep going until I can get all of the intestine out. If you like sausage, some sausage is made with the intestines because you can fill it back up with delicious meat. Not something that's right on my brain right now, but you get what I'm saying. Just keeps going and going. It's like a clown car of intestines. Gotta be careful when I get to the end. That's the end. I gotta get back to the beginning. How you holding up?
Good.
So that goes to the intestines, large intestine. This was at the beginning. This came from the bottom of the stomach. Just gotta pull it out. Let go. There it is. Ooh, got a little more. A little more. Just keeps coming. All right, I'm gonna cut it there. Cut this here. Okay. I am going to just start walking. My dog's gonna, ooh, it broke. So right from about where you are to me, that's the length of Woody's small intestines. What would you say, Mr. Brown? 20 feet, 25 feet?
About 20 feet.
20 feet of small intestine. So it gives that distance as the food passes in, it moves it a crawl, just being absorbed, being worked on. It gives the body enough time to pull all the nutrients out that it can. Hey. And yet, it fits so nicely in a little ball. All right. Cool. All right, so those were the small intestine. This is where the nutrients gets absorbed. Once you get that done, I haven't mentioned it yet, but all along this process, once we start digestion, the body has to invest a lot of water. The water softens up the food, makes it easier for the enzymes to work on it. So now the body, Woody's body, would have to get that water back out. To do so, it uses the large intestines. Normally the way it works for us is we pass food into our large intestine and then out through our rectum, colon, out to the world. But this little guy, because he eats so much wood, and because they can't, when I say wood, you know what I mean. He eats the bark, and the bark contains cellulose that he can't digest. Well, that goes over into this weird organ, and I had to look this up the first time I took apart a beaver. How do you get this guy? If you're a deer hunter, see Mr. DePoint's out there, he knows about this. They have this thing called a cecum. Come on, buddy. Where are you? Here. So the food enters through here, and this should be the normal path of large intestine out to the rest of the body. But now I've got this pocket over here, this extra something. This whole, it's like a whole purse of stuff. That purse of stuff, this is all old digested woody material that bacteria are inside here, and those bacteria are continuing to work on that cellulose so they can extract just a little bit more nutrients out of what's in there. And since this started on his right side, let's see if I can find it. Man, this stuff is... You smell that? Starting to...
Smells like a nice candle.
Yeah. This could be a good infomercial for that candle. I'm trying a hard time finding the appendix. Anyway. All right. So here it enters. Let's follow it out through the large intestine. As you can see, the shape of the large intestine changes, and it might even resemble the shape of something that you're familiar with, right? Because that's what's happening. We're turning this into feces. We're turning this into feces, and there's little pockets in here that just keep pulling out water, pulling out water, pulling out water until it gets down to here. This is the rectum, and if I pull this tissue away, I can actually, this is where it's all coming out. If I push hard enough, I might be able to get him to poop. There we go. There's the remainder of the feces that was coming out. If we compare that against this, there really isn't much difference. The only reason this has that color and that texture is because of the bacteria that have been working on the nutrients that pass through. This smells like pine. This, honestly, you would think it smells horrible. It doesn't. It doesn't smell as bad as you would think it would. Let's see if we can get him to knock one more out. Oh, empty. All right, so let's break that off. Get the intestines out. Take his liver out. And now we have the excretory system. In the back wall of the body sits the kidneys. Your kidneys have blood vessels that feed to them, your renal arteries and your renal veins, and they bring in the blood, and inside the kidney, I'll open them up in a minute, inside the kidney, this is where blood gets filtered out of toxins like urea. And then these two cords right there, you can barely see them, they're the ureters. Here's a ureter here, and here's a ureter here. Those drain the urine out and into the urinary bladder, which is this guy. So if I squeeze that, sometimes I can still make him pee, but it looks like he's done peeing. So here's the bladder. All right, let's get those bad boys out. Take a peek. Starting to sprinkle. Come on now. So much glare. All right, let's see what we have. Whoops. Outside, you have what's called the cortex. On the inside is the medulla. And you can see these little tiny, I don't know if you can see them, these little tiny runs that come out. Like little, you hold still, I'll come to you. I guess that's about as good as it's going to get. These little tiny pockets that come out, and they all bleed into this collection tubule. This is where your urine, this is where your urine drains to. So it starts as these little droplets that come from the outside of the kidney, and they all collect down longer tubules until they get to the main tubule, and then they leave through what will become your ureter. I mean, did we do that? Kidney ureter? Oh, we didn't do kidneys this year because of just because. So we would have. All right. So there's the kidneys. kidney out of the way. We're almost done. This is a boy. Some mammals for reproduction. Hopefully there's no little kids watching right now. Some males for reproduction, for copulation purposes, the penis has to be able to do its job. Let's just leave it at that. And to do that, it sometimes needs a little help. So this guy, beavers, all males, have something called I think it's pronounced a baculum. Familiar with that?
No.
It's crazy. Okay. It's hard to do with gloves. Get to the inside. Okay. The inside penis. And then probably wondering why this piece of tissue is standing by itself. And that is because the baculum is a bone. I know raccoons have one. I didn't, obviously beavers have one. But underneath what's left of this muscle, just for the interest of time, I'm not going to keep hacking this away. Might be making somebody uncomfortable. Underneath all this tissue is a bone. Go ahead, Mr. Brown. Isn't that crazy? And that just helps with the reproductive process. And it's from about where my thumb is to the end. All right. Fascinating. Testes are right here on the inside. So that is one testy. That's the vas deferens. I think that is might be the prostate or the seminal vesicle. And then I cut that out. This is one testy. And when we teach reproduction, let me get this oriented. Yeah. So there's the testicle. And then right above it, you have something called the epididymis. Yeah, okay, so testicle, epididymis. And the epididymis is where the sperm goes to mature. Sperm gets made down in the testicle, but once it's made, it migrates through these tiny little tubules and then gets up into the epididymis, and it will stay there for about 3 months before it's ready for use. If I could describe the inside of a testicle to someone who's never seen one, I would call it micro ramen noodles, because it's just all these little tiny tubules. And showing you now doesn't even do it justice because you can't see, but there are these little tiny eensy weensy little tubules. You gotta get far enough away, close enough, or yeah, I mean, underneath the microscope, it's just this back and forth of all these little squiggly ramen noodles. So hopefully I've ruined your taste for ramen noodles. And it's pronounced ramen. If anybody wants to get into a debate, we can have that later. All right, so cardiovascular, respiratory, excretory, reproductive. There's only one left to do, and that's the nervous system. Gently, ever so gently. Through there. Gotta find the joint. Talk about myelination this week.
Yeah.
The white that you see right there, that's myelination. The nerve is on the inside. I did a bad job of cutting it, but you'll be able to see it better when I get to the spinal cord. Myelination allows nerves to fire faster. You might want to turn the camera away for this one. Okay, so now we are looking down the central nervous system, and this is the back of the skull, and this is the hole that leads to the back of the skull. It's called the magnum foramen, and that right there is its spinal cord, and you can see that it's white. That white is all of the cell axons that are myelinated, and on the inside are all the dendrites. We can't see those. But it's accumulating on its way up. So the white stuff is all the myelination. I wonder if I can look down. No, it's not going to work. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to have Mr. Brown. He's going to face the camera towards the backyard, and he and I are going to work on getting the brain exposed. So just give us a few minutes to work on this. I'm gonna have to get this salt. Can I put that blade on?
Doesn't matter which one.
Probably the one that isn't bent. I don't want somebody taking their hand off. All right, you ready?
Yep.
You're doing it. You're gonna go turn it on first without touching anything? Yep. Nothing?
Not safety or anything, is there?
Got a plug from the inside. We'll be right with you, public. Start up first. All the way. Good enough. All right. Cross that. All right, welcome back, everybody. So, here's what we have. different parts of the brain have been exposed. So there's the spinal cord. Let's find this the right way. Yep. Here's the spinal cord as it was coming in, and it passes by something called the cerebellum. This is motor function, muscle memory. So if you think about doing something, a sport, an instrument, it's really this part of your brain that you build up. That's what I'm looking for, like more neurons, more neurological strength. Who was it? Alexa Patterson. Lexi, this is the part of the brain that we were talking about. This piece builds up, the neurological pathways build up, not the size of the cerebellum. This also controls coordination and function. So we go up a little farther. Past that, you have the pons, the medulla. Those pieces help with breathing, heart rate. And then you get to this structure right here. It's sort of like a gummier looking thing. That is called the corpus callosum. That is the bridge between this side of the brain and the other side of the brain. And information passes back and forth. So one side of your brain is more for, I would say, art and what's the word? Abstract thought, and the other side of the brain is more for mathematical, logical reasoning. Above that, this piece, this is scientifically called the thinky part. It's your cerebrum, the frontal lobe. So this is the front, this is the snout. This is where it's personality. All of our personalities lie in the frontal lobe. Behind that, somewhere in the thalamus, you have like your limbic system, you have your emotional center. So think about this. This is sort of cool. Smell passes from your olfactory. There's some nerves that go this way. And then when it has to get to the midbrain for information to be decided about what you're smelling, it has to pass by your limbic system. And your limbic system is a piece of neurological framework that's in here. So let's say you think, oh, I smell crayons. It brings me back to kindergarten. It's because when you were smelling crayons as being a kid, that smell was passing by your emotional center, and it helped ingrain some of those emotions with the smell. It tied the two together. So that's where that comes from. As I told you before, the tooth keeps growing. Well, this is the bottom of the tooth, and that tooth is embedded. I mean, look how far. This is the front of the tooth that we were talking about. There it is. I can't see the bottom. I didn't get to the bottom jaw, but it's embedded pretty far. I'm not going to take the eye out. That takes way too long, as well as the ear. Nice cross section, though, isn't it?
Beautiful.
It really is. Piece of work. I might bring that Sawzall to school more often for this demonstration. Usually we make a mess. We try to soften up with like a light hand, and it doesn't work. All right. I think that's it, Mr. Brown. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Don't let the neighbors see this. If you guys have any questions or want to know more about what we were doing today, you can email us, either Mr. Brown or myself. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending the 2020 Beaver Dissection, and thank you.